If it doesn't, give me back the host. And oh, yep, we're good. Okay. Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
glad
and just
you guys
Liam-
know what you're doing.
Liam, just keep the host because I can still bring people in and out. So it doesn't, I don't need any sort of host abilities here. If it doesn't, give me back the host. And oh, yep, we're good. Okay. And Liam, you probably want to close out your YouTube window.
Glad you guys-
Good. Okay. Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021 regular town council meeting of Scarborough, Maine. The first item is our Pledge of Allegiance. And bear with me as I pull up our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, item number 3 is roll call. Tody?
Counselor Clucci?
Here.
Counselor Gleisting? Counselor Gleisting? Okay,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson?
Here.
Counselor Katarina?
Yes.
Counselor Johnson?
Yeah.
Counselor Hamel?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Johnson.
Good. Yes.
Thank you.
You confused me there, Tody. Item number 4.
Sorry, Chairman.
No, it's okay. I promise I'm going to confuse easily tonight. Item number 4 is general public comments. So any members of the public that would like to speak, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'm going to go to item number 5, which is approval of the minutes from the January 20th, 2021 regular town council meeting and the January 26th, 2021 special town council meeting. Do I have a motion
So moved.
and a second? Thank you. Discussion? None? Okay. Tody?
Counselor Clucci?
Yes.
Counselor Gleisting?
Yes.
Counselor Anderson?
Yes.
Counselor Katarina?
Yes.
Counselor Johnson?
Yes.
Counselor Hamel?
Yes.
And Chairman Johnson.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Vote was unanimous.
Item number 7, items to be signed. I owe Tody a visit tomorrow. I'm going to sign them tomorrow. Item number 8 is the town manager's report. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just I want to comment, I guess, off the top regarding the stormwater training. I appreciate all of your attendance at that. I know the material can be dry, but I think it's important just to note that there's a required annual elected officials training. And I think some important points are accomplished there, and hopefully some education was imparted as well. I do want to reiterate what was said. We do have some rock stars on our staff. Angela Blanchette is really a statewide expert. Mike Shaw and Jamie Fitch, who's our sustainability coordinator, are quite adept at these matters as well. Angela in particular has been leading this local regional group, but really a statewide effort in negotiating this MS4 permit, and has done a marvelous job of keeping me advised. And I assure you, I'll make you aware when things are rolling forward from a financial point of view. I don't think it's quite as dire as might have been suggested tonight, but perhaps at Finance Committee, we can bring up some of those expected costs coming down the line. A simple example, and this has come up quite often, our purchase of and commitment to doing stormwater sweeping, street sweeping. It sounds simple, but it's a huge component in terms of water quality. And so that's a good example of a budget issue that has direct impact on our MS4 permit. So thank you again for your attendance and attention during that. I want to give you a vaccination update, kind of 2 different pieces. I was pleased to be part of a ribbon cutting at Maine Health, their new vaccination site today. Councilors Hamel and Katarina were both in attendance. Well-attended media event. The commissioner of DHHS was there. Certainly Bill Karen on behalf of Maine Health. And it's worth noting that all the speakers made a specific point of thanking the town for its contributions toward this effort. So Really a day that I was swelling with pride sitting in the audience, just knowing that we were a part of that. So appreciate everything you've done to help support that effort. And I can't wait to see that up to full capacity. On the local front, we continue to work through the first responders. Scarborough Fire and EMS, again, are one of 3 providers of vaccinations in Cumberland County to everyone in that category. This week, we administered 130 second doses and 10 first doses. On occasion, we will have extra doses, and the basic rule is we don't want anything to go to waste. So we've been able, over time, through the course of this effort, to vaccinate a number of folks that are outside of the category. And we've been very thoughtful, I think, in prioritizing other town staff. So I think I reported last meeting, all of our frontline town hall staff workers, those that are interacting with the public, have received their first dose, at least those that want it. And then today we're actually able to make some headway with about half the public works employees. Though they don't have the same interaction with the public, this time of year they are essential workers. Just imagine 1 or 2 plow drivers not able to be on the run. So very pleased we've been able to make some inroads, certainly with first responders, but also with some critical staff here in town. Next week, we're scheduled for another 100 doses for these will be second doses. And to date, we've put about 650 shots into people's arms. So very proud of the efforts of staff in that regard. We are in full-blown budget development mode. Finance Committee is working on perfecting and finalizing some of the particulars of the budget goal, which I think all of us are eager to know about. I think Councillor Clucci might mention it earlier in terms of next steps in that regard. But really the month of February is where my department heads are working feverishly. And by the end of the month, they will be providing me their proposed budgets. And then essentially I have the month of March to be putting it all together, essentially. We're on schedule to make a presentation of that budget on March 31st. And that's a typical schedule where that we've done for the last decade or so. All of this kind of is predicated on leaving enough time for the review process by the council and setting us up for the validation vote in June for the school budget. So just so you're aware, that's something that's certainly occupying staff's time and will for the next 6 or 8 weeks, for sure. I guess the other thing I'd comment on is just kind of the interplay between the comprehensive plan and the growth management ordinance. As the council is well aware, these are 2 equally important priorities. They are, however, they are competing for staff time. And so we're trying to find a way to carve out time to really advance one and therefore be able to move on to the other. I've brought a couple of ideas in that regard up to Councillor Anderson, who's kind of taken point on the comp plan process. And just today I was able to kind of start to share it with council leadership. But essentially, we'd like to see if there's a way to devote our time and attention to the comp plan to really get that through. And if we can, we expect we can have a final document back to the council by mid-March. I should mention another development that I think is very positive. We have retained GPCOG and a couple of their key staff people. Keep in mind, they do write comp plans. It's part of the work they do. So these are experts, not in specific to Scarborough, but we don't need their substantive input. What we're really looking for is some of the criticisms, valid criticisms we heard from council, is just flow and connectivity and readability of the document. We think their level of input can be extremely valuable to kind of really put the final touches on this document. And that work will be going on concurrently. Jay at this point has, I believe, weekly meetings with Long Range and is sending them components of the rewrite, if you will, as he completes them. And so that's an ongoing process and going quite well. Very pleased that Long Range has committed its time and attention on a weekly basis to this. They certainly appreciate the importance. I guess at the same time, it's worth noting that we kind of find ourselves in a strange spot with the growth management ordinance. It's kind of reached a level because of the fact that we've run out of our growth permits already this year. This is the annual allocation. I don't think that should come as a surprise to any of you, nor should the fact that the development community is quite anxious about this development. And so it curiously puts some additional strain and intensity on the matter, and maybe urgency. And so we're trying to resist the urge of that. I've had preliminary conversations with council leadership around possible short-term changes that could be made to the GMO that would really be specifically directed to small approved subdivisions, and most importantly, developments that aren't part of a subdivision. So think of an average resident who wants to develop a second lot for their kid, or for sale for that matter. These are folks that are really unsuspecting. They're not engaged in this growth management discussion, and as you might expect, are extremely surprised and disappointed to hear that they cannot get a permit until next year at the earliest. I guess the other thing that's unique is that we've actually sold 42 growth permits for next year, which is a provision of the current ordinance. It allows us to do this. And so they're already stacking up, and at this pace, before long, we'll probably have already consumed next year's allocation. So all of this is leading to some angst. And I think Chairman Johnson and myself are going to get together and start just reflecting back on the sorts of different pieces of this conversation that are relevant, that have occurred over the last, I'll say, 24 months. And in our quick process doing that this afternoon, we identified there's a lot of good work that's been done, but it's been kind of piecemealed. And I think it'll be helpful to see if we can advance this growth management discussion maybe on a quicker pace. So I'm kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth in that I'd like to focus on comp plan, but the GMO pressure, we're feeling it. I received calls today from three developers and 2 additional residents who are interested and concerned about this. So I suspect if you haven't heard already, you'll start to hear, and the pressure will probably mount as we go forward. So I'm just putting it out there that I do recommend we look at some short-term changes as I described, perhaps as soon as your next meeting, and then really start, if we can, getting some policy direction from the council or the ordinance committee, as it were, so staff can start to actually look at the mechanics of amending the ordinance and moving this along. So I appreciate your listening to me describe that, and I'm certainly available for questions if you have any.
Anybody have any questions? Councilor Gleason?
Yeah, how can counselors and the public get a hard copy or electronic hard copy, for lack of a better term, of what Jay is giving to the Long Range Planning Committee that they're looking at? A lot of times it's not in the agenda packet. So I've had folks ask me how, they can only see stuff on the screen, and they're asking to actually be able to read it. And I would like to as well, along with the LRPC.
I'll speak to Jay. Frankly, I don't have access to that, but this is being written as we speak. So I'm not surprised that it wouldn't be available much in advance, but it's certainly public information.
Not in advance, just whatever that's being discussed at the meeting.
I will speak to Jay, and we'll make every effort to make that available to the council and anyone else who's interested. These are public meetings, and I think many of you may have attended one or more of these discussions.
Right. Yeah. I've had people say it's difficult to follow because they don't have anything in front of them, and they're trying to follow on a screen or even listen to what people are saying, because we don't put out the PDF for some of the things that the Long Range looks at. And just really quick on another point that you brought up. You said you hired GP Cog. I think I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. It was another counselor who brought up that Maine Municipal also does that type of review. Is that something that we thought about giving or passing over to Maine Municipal? Is that included in our, the fees that we pay, or is there any value in their feedback on our comp plan?
Frankly, I'm not aware that Maine Municipal offers that level of service. I'm not aware of it, and therefore I've not considered it. I'm really pleased with the scope of work we've negotiated with GP and more equally important, the sort of quality staff that they're able to bring to this. These are professional planners that do this. So I really think we'll be well served, and it's an incredibly attractive price. We're able to do that
Right,
within our
I
current
mean, I
budget.
definitely encourage that in my talks with you and our planner, Jay, but it's just, just input feedback from MMA too, because they look at a lot of them, I guess, maybe from across the state, but I was just curious if we had done that. Okay, great, thanks. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Councilor Clucci?
Thanks for the update, Tom. Do we have a sense for what the queue might look like in terms of projects that have been or developments that have been approved at the planning level but have not yet been permitted? Do we track that?
Sure. I think Jay has that information. Some of them may be, approved years ago and have not advanced. Others are far more recent.
Okay.
But yes, I believe we do have that information.
That's-
There's also the larger developers, I should say, are, as you might expect, planning phases that we're not even aware of. And so from their perspective, they're concerned about something that isn't even on a radar screen. These are things that are in development phase and will be intending to make application to planning board this spring and early summer and be looking for permits sometime, before the end of the year.
Okay, a lot to think about with that. So
Mhm.
that helps.
Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, thanks for that update, Tom. Could you elaborate a little bit on something you just mentioned, that you and leadership are getting together to bring something forward to the council as early as maybe the next meeting for these short-term pressures on GMO? And I say that because, and not to be flip, I've been trying to get a COVID vaccine now for 2 months. And I can't call the governor and get a vaccine. I wait in line just like everybody else. And I think you know where I stand on the developer. But could you elaborate a little bit on what the plan is to bring forward to the town council?
I'll elaborate on it. I think it's more appropriate that I elaborate on it. First, we had the meeting at 4 p.m. today, and Don and I have been in Zoom meetings since then, so we've had no opportunity to report it out. Secondly, there's a provision in the growth management ordinance that allows code enforcement to offer 5 additional growth permits to Harry homeowner. And so there was some discussion about should we increase that to 10 growth permits or 12 or 15, nothing overly significant. That provision that allows the code enforcement to do 5 permits on their own excludes subdivisions.
Okay.
However, there is a gentleman that lives in a subdivision, for instance, in Pine Point, and it's a subdivision of 8 homes. 7 have been built. He has the 8th, and he cannot legally build an 8th home now.
Right.
So the idea is we think he still counts as Harry homeowner. So could we have some language, not new subdivisions? It's important to say approved subdivisions. Is there a way that gentleman that lives in Pine Point Road can still build his house? This is all brainstorming. These are all things that we'll attempt to communicate out, but essentially it's a pressure release valve for Harry homeowner that wants to come build a house. Now, that is an emergency change to an ordinance. So everybody can vote on it and you can tell them to get in line all you want to as a council, or we could, it doesn't matter. But that's the nature of the beast. I think Don will attest, he's dealt with a constituent or two that there's some pretty intense situations of private homeowners that are being told they can't build a house.
Okay, so just to clarify one more and I'll let it go.
Yeah.
Because now I hear the term emergency ordinance and we know how that works, right? I mean, it's an emergency, so we can hear something and vote on it. So is that the plan, that this be an emergency enhancement to the GMO?
I think you're giving a little too much credit about an idea that we're just trying to help out constituents, and you're going down a road that frankly I don't necessarily know. And let's not paint it with any brush yet, because it's not going to be constructive.
All right.
We know that we have constituents right now that, let's say, own homes on 4 acres of land, and let's say part of their retirement is they were going to build a second home to, let's say, retire into a smaller downsized home, and they can't. So that's disconcerting. to me as leadership, and we're brainstorming ways to maybe help them. But ultimately, it's up to us as a body.
Okay.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, Ken, you and I are on ordinance along with Jean Marie, so whatever we do would have to go that route, number one. And number two, we're just trying to abide by the current deadline that we're looking at in terms of having a recommendation at the end of June. So these are just preliminary conversations that haven't really gone very far, but obviously we'll build on some of the other ideas that have been put forward so far. And hopefully we can move quickly and be responsive
All right.
I
together.
think we're running the risk of not thinking clearly. If we have, let's say, a dozen homeowners, we need to create an environment that we can think and analyze the situation with a clear head. And if we have 5 to 10 homeowners that are pretty intensely and rightfully so upset, I think that might cloud our thinking. So I think we're just trying to figure out a way of how do we create a path that we can keep working on our work. Councilor Caterina and then Councilor Gleistein.
Yeah, I've started giving some thought to this, given the situation, and frankly, my 2 cents worth right now is I would like to see some short-term way of addressing the immediate situation we find ourselves in while we continue working on the longer picture. And just so people know regarding process, technically a short-term fix doesn't necessarily have to go through ordinance, could come directly to the council. But I'm very happy to hear that leadership and Mr. Hall have begun looking at this, because it is right now we have in effect a moratorium on building in Scarborough. It's not right. And I think we need to do something to deal with it in the short term while we're looking at the long term.
Councilor Gleistein.
Yeah, this is why we have a GMO, right? To put standards in. So, if we go around it, I'm not, I guess, we'll take a look at it, but this is why we have it. We've had months and even years since the thing has been looked at, to anticipate this type of situation. But I guess my question is to Tom, and then, comment about these short-term fixes. So can we get a list from Jay of who got the permits, what they got them for? Are they partial permits, the fractionalization, and then the extra 42 that have been bought? Can we get an update from Jay on what those are and where they've gone?
Didn't we just get a list that Dawn asked for?
Yeah, probably.
Like in the last couple weeks?
Yeah.
Or am I
That
dreaming?
was a week or so ago. I don't think it'd been completely updated yet, but
Okay,
it was
all right.
maybe 5%.
Okay.
But yeah, everyone got a copy of that a week or so ago, I think.
The answer to your question is yes. I have the first part of your request. I'll have to work with planning to get the 42 permits that have already been purchased for next year. I just don't have that.
Right, and it'll include the fractionalization and that type of thing. So I know Jay has always shown us the information in 2 ways. Here's the number of units actual, and then here's the number of permits. He's always been good about breaking that out for us. So if we could see that, and then, the theoretical person who's going to retire and was planning to build a second home, if this is something we're going to take up, I would highly encourage the town to encourage these people to put an application in and put it in writing of exactly what they want to do. I'm not going to personally be able to vote on theory that there may be folks out there who are impacted by this. I'd want to see the actual case by case, what they need exactly. So I'm just putting that out there. We're moving this forward. Me as a counselor, I'm going to want to know exactly what these are for, not just, there may be theoretical people out here who want to put a second home on there and they were planning on it for their retirement. And there's a guy that has.
Okay, you know what, Betsy, we're not, there's nothing on the table. This is not a debate on any, as you like to remind us, I can bring anything forward to the council I want to, and you guys are free to debate it and vote it when it's appropriate.
Absolutely, Paul. All I'm saying is,
Betsy, at this point, it's just, I was answering a question. We need to move on.
Yep, that's
So-
fine. What I'm saying is I'm strongly
And
Yeah.
Betsy, what I'm saying is this is not the time to debate
I'm
anything.
not debating it, Paul. I'm asking for details if we're going to bring it forward.
You're not, you're not asking for any detail. So
No, if
let's
you bring it
wait.
forward, I'm asking for details so that we can.
Betsy, I'm gonna move on. If it comes before council, there's a body of 7. We are free to debate and vote our conscience and what we think.
And I hope we have details to look at because I'd love to be responsive to specific requests by specific residents.
I encourage you to ask Don Hamill. He'll discuss exactly who I was
I
referencing.
hope they put in applications so we can specifically look at them.
Okay.
I apologize for starting that conversation, but we feel the intensity on a daily basis here, and it's only a matter of time before you feel it. So this effort is exploratory and really intended to have a solution ready if and when you want it.
Okay, I'm going to shut this down and I'm going to move on.
Thank you.
Order number 20087 is a public hearing only on a proposed amendments to chapter 405 Scarborough zoning ordinance, section 28B, Highgast Parkway District. The second reading will be scheduled for Wednesday, the February 17th, 2021. This is only a public hearing, but it is property owner initiated. So as is our practice as of late, I believe we have the property owner with us. So Tom, I think perhaps you give us the background. I'll invite the property owner to say any words that they want to. And then we can ask some questions. Although this is a public hearing, again, he's here. It's his time. We might as well use it if we have questions. So
Yes.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I'll give you just a quick kind of background and timeline. My records, I believe this came first to you last fall, October of 2020. The matter was passed in first reading, though there were reservations expressed by a number of councilors really around wanting to make sure there wasn't like great proliferation of drive-throughs in the HP district and wanted some restrictions and constraints around this. But I think general conceptual approval such that it passed in first reading. And so the matter was sent back to Long Range Planning Committee and also Planning Board in the interim months. They have recommended some additional amendments. I believe they are contained in your packet this evening. It was a memo from Jay Chase, town planner, dated January 12th, and an accompanied red line version that includes that additional suggested language. Should the council wish to consider some or all of that additional language, of course, formal amendments would need to be offered in second reading. Jay is here this evening, certainly could answer any particular questions if you wish, but I think that's the background. And as you mentioned, I believe Andrew Sturgeon, the consultant, and then the 2 property owners are in the audience as well.
So if anybody, before we ask questions, if anybody would like to speak, go ahead and raise your hand. I can bring you in. If you wouldn't, that's fine too, and you can just react to our questions. And just some background, we saw this quite a while ago. I know just fresh from the council, I believe it was kicked back to Planning Board and Long Range Planning, and hence the delay. I think some of us thought it just was withdrawn. That's how it was. I think it's a solid 2.5 months ago. So just as counselors, if you can think back, that's when it was. So I don't see any hands raised. So do any counselors have any questions about this? It is a public hearing, but I think with people here. Okay, Councilor Hamill?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I know this back a ways, and I know the first vote was in favor of moving it forward 4-3. As you stated, it's a property owner initiated zoning amendment involving a restaurant with a drive-through service. So I don't, is Jay going to talk about this at all, or we're just going to handle it from a standpoint of questions, Paul? Sorry, you're on mute. Sorry. I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute and pull Jay in all at the same time. Jay, do you want to? I know Tom just gave a refresher, but Don, am I hearing that you just want a little bit more?
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful. I don't know how the other counselors feel, but it's just been so long. I kind of lost the thread on it a little bit, and I spent some time reading up on it. But the refresher or teeing it up from Jay would be very helpful.
Yep.
Thank
okay.
you.
So go ahead, Jay. It's all yours.
Sure, I'm pleased to do it, and I won't sort of rehash everything that Tom went through, but I do just for timing purposes. So this was, as we already noted, initiated by the property owners, and its first step, it went to the Long Range Planning Committee in September. And then in October, it came back to Town Council, where there were some concerns raised by Town Council. I think largely sort of around what I heard and recollecting was around the proliferation or the potential proliferation of drive-throughs along the Higas Parkway, among some other concerns. As was noted, once it passed first reading, it went to the planning board, and the planning board shared some of those similar concerns around proliferation, but then they also got into some of the issues that they're normal or more accustomed to dealing with, I should say, through a site plan review in terms of stacking of drive-through lanes and what does a mixed-use building really mean and those sorts of things. So they had some questions as well, and actually referred the item to Long Range Planning Committee to dig into those questions further. Long Range Planning Committee sort of did their work and then brought forward a host of changes that the planning board considered in just in January of this year. And really the changes were really around these performance standards. And those are identified really in section, I think it's 2B, new language 6, which as said are these performance standards that are really aimed at addressing what is meant by a mixed use building. So really requiring that the restaurant not exceed 50% of the gross leasable area of a building. The concern was I think it was raised by the planning board, where you could say, well, this is a mixed use building where it's predominantly a drive-through restaurant with a itty bitty little other thing attached to it, and say, yep, there you go. So this requires that no more than 50% of the building be dedicated to the drive-through restaurant. That there only be one drive-through restaurant allowed in any given plan development. And then the other one, to get to the issue of sort of proliferation, the planning board looked at, in long range planning, looked at actually language we've used, the town has used it in other areas to sort of limit the location within proximity of an intersection. So 1,200 feet, 1,250 feet, if I'm not mistaken, of the Payne Road and Higas intersection. And so that sort of limits again, the proliferation, the ability for it to sort of be all the way down the Higas Parkway. Also, one of the issues, and this gets to both sort of proliferation as well as site utilization, ensure that the lot's at least an acre of size and that there be a minimum of 300-foot drive aisle between sort of where the normal stacking lane might end and the public way intersection. And that's really to prevent the queuing out into the main road that we see at some of our drive-throughs in town, where there isn't quite as much given in the way of on-site queuing rather than queuing out into the public way. So those are really sort of the policy changes that are before you. And then I just note that a lot of the other changes, and that's, I think, really in one of the last page or two of the ordinance that you have before you. There are a host of other items which are really administrative in nature, really just sort of aligning this ordinance to read the way other ordinances which have been more recently updated flow and function. But I would say those are sort of the predominant policy issues that were addressed. I think I touched on your question, Don. I might have lost the thread and all that.
I just had a couple of follow-up questions, if I may, Paul, on this. Thanks, Jay, for the wind-up here. But just in terms of process, so it generally, as I read it, the Long Range Planning Committee was in favor of this moving forward and being approved. But they said consultation with traffic engineer would be useful. I'm just kind of wondering, has that been done? You know, have we done that?
Yes, that was completed, and I'll apologize. I don't remember at which stage that was done. But yes, that was completed and looked at as part of both the planning board and long range planning process. I'll see if I can find where that memo was and when that occurred, but
It's not necessary if you're sure that it was done. That's the
Yep,
main thing.
absolutely.
So the second thing I would say is that in terms of next steps, this goes to the planning board next, right? After this, or we're all done with that?
That's the other one, John. That's the other zoning amendment on the agenda. So this would be second reading at our next meeting.
This is the public hearing.
Yeah, we're at a public hearing right now.
Okay.
so just so I can, and maybe I would, the planning board has, the language that you have in your packet before you is what the planning board reviewed at their last public hearing just 2 or 3, 4 weeks ago in January. And
Okay.
actually there was a change that came out of that meeting. I did talk about how one of these performance standards talks about how the entire building must be located within 1,250 feet of that intersection. Previously, the language read something to the effect of the parcel or the property needed to be within that distance. And the planning board, doing their due diligence, and sort of said, well, what if it just clips the very corner of a parcel? Does that? So anyway, so the planning board has reviewed this language, and actually their changes have been incorporated into this as part of the proposal to you.
Okay, thanks. And then just kind of net it all out. This is a residential use. This restaurant with a drive-through service and a mixed-use building is a residential use permitted only in a planned development, right? So that's kind of the crux of the thing. That was kind of the key question.
I guess I'm not following the residential component. So it's a drive-through in a mixed-use building. That mix of uses could be residential, or it could be other office space. I would imagine what we'd likely see is this as part of an office space. And actually, if you recall, the property owner who initiated this, as part of their application to the town, they need to give a conceptual of what they're looking at. And that was what they had proposed, was that it would be a component of, I think there might have been retail and office space, so they didn't have a residential component necessarily.
But this change though falls underneath the residential uses permitted in a planned development. As I read your proposed, unless I'm not reading it right.
Oh, right. So so that's one of the strike throughs is, so, yeah. So we would actually strike out under permitted uses the word residential uses. And the reason that is under the Higas Parkway currently, we have a list of residential uses, and it says the following residential uses are permitted only in planned developments. We don't require any other non-residential to go through planned development. So
Okay.
we would just strike out the word resident, and we'd say the uses under here now all require planned development. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 currently. This would be the 6 additional. 5
Okay.
of the 6 are residential.
Okay. That answers my question. So the only thing I'd add is this, I know you've got another agenda item tonight that addresses site plan review amendments. You don't have to answer this now. I think we can bring it up at that time, but I'm wondering how this would be affected if that were in place. Is this involved at all or not? And you don't really, I can wait until we go through that one, but it did seem to me that maybe I'm connecting something potentially that shouldn't be connected, but I just want to get that straight in my own mind, but I maybe handled better later on.
Yeah, Don,
I
let's handle that on the agenda item.
Okay, but thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Don. Counselor Anderson, I think you had your hand raised.
Yep. So when I watched the October meeting when this was first deliberated, a few of you were thinking that this might make more sense as a contract zone amendment. And then in the packet, it mentioned that when that was brought to the long range planning committee, they didn't think that was the best approach, but I didn't see anything in there as to why. So I'm hoping maybe Jay or somebody could just kind of elaborate a little bit on why a contract zone amendment might not be a good use in this case? We've debated that a lot lately, and so I'm just trying to still understand the difference between the two.
I'll take a stab. Contract zone, for very good reasons, is a very rigorous process. And I think the premise here is if the use being requested is generally acceptable, particularly in light of additional performance standards, then why require a contract zone process that will simply slow the process down and unnecessarily involve the council? I suppose you could do that, but I think it's a very cumbersome way of considering the matter. And I suspect Long Range felt the same way as a matter of approach.
Yeah, and I'll just have to say, Councilor Anderson, I truly don't recall the sort of depth of that conversation. I remembered essentially the gist of it as you're recollecting it. I don't remember the depth of it, but maybe Jean Marie or Don, who also attend those meetings, might have better recollection around that piece of it than I.
Go ahead, Jean. Go ahead, Jean Marie. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah, I was involved with this. I was one of the counselors who didn't want to see a proliferation of drive-throughs on the Haggis Parkway. And it was pretty in-depth discussion we had on long-range planning. I will tell you, long-range planning, you know, if you don't have to go to contract zone, you shouldn't. Contract zones really should be used sparingly. They're sort of a way around spot zoning, which is illegal, to be honest with you. But I'm not going down that road here tonight. So long range planning, I felt like it was brilliant when they said, oh, well, we'll make it so it's only 1,250 feet from that intersection there at Payne and Haggis. So that pretty much limits where they can be. They can't go down Haggis Parkway. They did, send it to planning board, who did do what they did to make it, more rigorous, make sure the building looks good and it's not just some goofy something or other. Frankly, I think this will be a great addition to that particular area. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I know the long range planning feels that way, as does the planning board. So that's a little bit about why, John, it didn't go through contract zoning. There's no need to go through contract zoning if you don't have to.
Councilor Clucci, and then that's it, I think, so far. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, John, that there were some comments from the planning board members that they might struggle with the public benefit portion of the contract zone for this particular proposal. So they thought it did make more sense the way it's been brought forward.
John, you got 5 answers to your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jay before we move on? And before we move on, anybody in the audience would like to speak to this? Okay, seeing none, I am going to close the public hearing. As a reminder to all of us, this is up for second reading next meeting. Order number 21006 is a 7 p.m. public hearing on the proposed amendments to Chapter 302, the Town Council Rules and Procedures, subsection 203D, members of Rules and Policy Committee. The second reading will be scheduled for February 7th, 2021. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this? Hearing none, I'm going to move on. Order number 21003 is a second reading on the proposed amendments to Chapter 303, the Town of Scarborough Personnel Ordinance, Section 507, vacation, and adding Section 508, earned paid leave for part-time employees. I believe we have talked about this at first reading and at public hearing. So I am going to, are there any questions or further clarification for Liam? Okay, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Tony?
Counselor Pucci,
Yes.
Counselor Glystein,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
and Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
That was unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. New business, order number 21010, first reading and refer to the planning board, the proposed amendments to chapter 405, the town of Scarborough zoning ordinance, and chapter 405B, the town of Scarborough site plan review ordinance, and schedule the public hearing upon receipt. Tom, I'm going to share my screen for this just to maybe, because I know there's a lot of ink on this one, I believe. So why don't you tee it up while I kind of get this situated? No, I put you on mute, Tom, because I've been getting feedback. I'm sorry. There you go.
Yes, I believe I provided some certainly information in the packet, but also provided a follow-up email. But I think it bears kind of going back over that same territory. This matter has been nearly 2 years in the works, frankly. It first came forward in December of 2018. And it was initially heard by the Long Range Planning Committee, who generally saw it as a favorable approach, but certainly needed more input. I guess I should back up. This proposal intends to advance what we're calling an administrative review process for certain, for projects in certain zones, very specifically. It's worth noting that none of the standards are relaxed. All of the same standards that currently apply, that currently the planning board uses as part of their review and approval process still apply. It's simply staff is delegated to be able to do that level of review and approval. And so just the quick history of this is, as I said, it started in late December 2018 with an initial kind of favorable read. The matter really languished through all of 2019. And frankly, I can't give you, I don't recall what the cause of that was. I don't believe that there was any reason for it. I think we just got busy and distracted, frankly. And then early last year, 2020, the matter resurfaced only to be succumb to the pandemic and really went quiet through the spring and summer and came back to you. My recollection is the Downs team made pretty clear mention of this in kind of their closing comments as part of their annual report out in terms of kind of next steps and what the town could do to help support their efforts. And then through the course of the fall, we actually went through drafting language, so on and so forth, and here we are, just kind of waiting for time on the council agenda. So this proposal, the applicability is for light industrial zones, and the innovation district for permitted industrial uses only. The innovation district has a number, basically 4 different categories of permitted uses. This would apply only to the industrial uses. And again, it pertains to site plan review. It has no bearing on zoning matters. And is no relaxation of standards. It's simply a different review process that we, obviously the development community thinks is good in terms of timing and efficiency. Staff is doing the same level of review in their recommendations and comments to planning board. So I don't see it as additional work to staff per se. And frankly, I think planning board will benefit from having their agendas ease a bit. As you're all aware, their agendas have been quite full to the point that it's probably too much to ask and not a sustainable workload, frankly. So that's really the genesis of this. And certainly Jay is the expert in this area and available for questions if you have any.
Thank you. I think before we put it on the floor, I'll keep the questions open. So any questions from anybody? Councilor Hamel?
Yes, sorry. On this one, Jay or Tom, can you clarify for us what the criteria are? I know that it looks like we're going to make a distinction between major and minor developments. And could you explain kind of what criteria would be used there and how we expect this is going to alleviate the problem with backlog? I recall when this came up initially, the Downs folks were really quite adamant about the fact that it was just taking a long time to get through what they thought were very standard reviews.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to let Jay answer that, but I want to answer your question that you asked before, which pertained to the drive-through matter. That will have no bearing. Drive-through is specific to the Higas Parkway district, whereas this is specific to light industrial, and a portion of or some of the permitted uses in the innovation district. So there's no crossover between the two. So Jay, can you speak to minor and major projects?
Yeah. Yep. And I think maybe I just want to start the conversation also by mentioning this is something that's been on staff's mind for many years. Frankly, before I became the planning director, I was the senior planner and really in the role of dealing with primarily staffing planning board and their processes. And what I came to identify is that there are certain activities, certain zones where the planning board's role, planning board's role is really to sit as it's really a quasi judicial board. And they really weigh in, and their hard rub comes on sort of more qualitative type items in terms of what does a structure look like? How is the landscaping articulated? What sort of I'll call them the softer edges of a plan, right? Less so around those things that require hard engineering or deeper understanding, such as stormwater or traffic. And certainly the planning board plays a role in those things. But at the same time, there's a level of, the ordinance is sort of black and white in some of those respects. And so what, in many of the surrounding communities do have this sort of administrative review process where some items are delegated to staff. And it's the same review criteria. However, as we started looking at this and started the conversation with the long range planning committee, that's when, when it was flagged as the idea initially came forward for public discussion from the Downs regarding the innovation district. But, a lot of the discussions we had was, well, if it makes sense for the innovation district, where else might it make sense in town? And so that's why the industrial, light industrial, and those particular set of uses, as Tom referenced in the innovation district, seem to make the most sense, because those are areas where we don't have commercial design standards. The building, we don't particularly look at what the building looks like in industrial districts. We don't have as elevated standards around landscaping, and again, those softer edges items. And so that's sort of how that part of the discussion matriculated. And so I think, Don, your question is, again, so what's the difference between this major development and minor development? It's really about a threshold of it's the zones that we just talked about, industrial, light industrial, and just those particular uses. That's one threshold. But then it's about the size and scale of development. And this is really the work we got into with the planning board back in October during the workshop is, while I mentioned that, maybe the planning board doesn't dive quite as deep into stormwater and traffic. That's true on smaller projects. When we get into bigger projects and you start hitting certain thresholds, they really do start to play a bigger role. And so those are the thresholds that we try to identify here. It's if you're disturbing more than an acre of area, that's where we typically do need more than just the engineer expertise looking at it. We typically need someone to sit in that quasi-judicial role to sort of say, okay, there's a decision point here. What's the right way to go? And also with traffic, we have within our site plan review ordinance currently, we have this 35 trips is when you sort of trigger a higher analysis and traffic study that needs to be done. So that was also identified as being one of the triggers. And then it was also identified really any project that triggers any sort of state or federal permitting. That seemed to also make sense that, okay, if you're at that level, maybe that's not something we want done, that we do want done at the planning board level. I think the one other thing, so I hope that answers the question that was asked. If I can just take a moment to talk a little bit about the staff review process in this administrative review. As Tom already mentioned, the same standards are going to apply to every project. They're still submitting the same materials, the same standards are applying. It's really just about who is the review authority. And I'll say for staff's perspective, and Tom already touched on this, as the planning department, we already, with every project, we get together with every other department. We host a meeting where every department comes together. We review the plans as a unit, and sort of everyone's comments get fed into the staff review memo that then goes to the planning board. That would still be the process, that we would still get public safety, public works, sanitary district, engineering, planning, codes, everyone together to look at these projects and apply the same rules that we would to any other project that would typically apply. And I say that because, again, design standards don't apply in the industrial district. They don't apply in the innovation district. So we're applying the same rules that would apply to these projects regardless. It's really about who the review authority is predominantly what it's about. I guess the other thing, while I have the floor, not to bore everyone to death, two other big things I think that were talked about, came out of the planning board workshop, were really about sort of an appeals process. What happens when there's, disagreements? And it was, rather than making people go straight to Superior Court, it's, well, let's have it go through the planning board process first and have the, and let that be sort of the first arbiter of decisions that may be disputed. Hopefully we wouldn't get to that. And then the other one, and I think the more important one, at least from my perspective, is this notion around public notice. One, again, as I said, going through the same submission process, going through the same review process, and going through the same public comment process, still sending out notification to abutters, and we have a time frame by which abutters can respond written comments. And you'll notice in there, the language provides the staff review to elevate anything up to the planning board if it's controversial. So if a neighbor has some concern, some dispute that can't get resolved, the staff review could say, well, you know what, let's bring this to the planning board. And so that's really what that is pinned around. So those are just a couple of the other points I think I want to touch on, and if I think of others, I'll bring them up later.
I want to thank you, Jay, for that good explanation. I just had one other follow-on question. So I understand the language you came up with was developed with the input of the planning board, and they had a workshop on it on October 1st. But has the planning board actually reviewed the wording that's before us now? Have they reviewed the actual proposed edits?
Not yet. After following the workshop in October, whatever that date was, I informed Tom that I've had the workshop and really asked sort of what the next steps are from there. And I received an email a little while later that said the next step is to go to council for first reading. So that was the process that we followed so far. But to your earlier point, the next step in this process would be going to planning board for their review of the specific language, but they have not seen it formally to date.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson?
I think Councilor Gleisten had her hand up before me if she wants to go first.
No, it's okay. You can go.
Okay.
So Councilor Gleisten, I see you. I'll get to you next.
One of the a couple of questions for you, Jay, maybe that you can help answer. So my understanding was that this is really going to help the process move a little bit quicker. So what was it before, and what do we anticipate the cycle time is going to be now for things going through the administrative review process?
Yeah, and if I use quicker, I guess that's probably a misspeak. I see it really being on similar timeframes, right? We still need the applicant to submit their application. Staff still needs time to review to be sure the application's complete. We still need time to notify abutters. We still need time to receive abutters' letters back. We still need time to pull together our staff to review it, put together the memo, and provide that to the applicant. So I don't necessarily see that projects maybe will run through a ton quicker, other than one, what we'll do is relieve our volunteer planning board members from potentially having to review some projects that And I guess the one area where I could see things maybe going a little quicker is planning board meetings they're quasi judicial, right? They have a very sort of bureaucratic way they need to run, right? And that's just the nature of how the work gets done. Where I think with the administrative review process, as staff does on a daily basis, we'll be able to sit down with the applicant and their engineer and pour over the details in real time. Whereas with the planning board, often what happens is if staff has a comment and it's a very detailed comment, the planning board, they don't fully understand how stormwater flows work or calculations work. So they're like, okay, tell you what, get together with staff and figure it out, come back to us. And if staff's happy, we're happy. So I think we'll be able to do that a little bit quicker in real time. But outside of that, I've already started talking with my staff that if this moves forward, we're going to need to put together a schedule like we have for planning board meetings. We have sort of this cadence and schedule that's put out for the year. We'll need to do something similar to that so people don't have sort of unrealistic expectations as to how quickly we'll be able to get through something, but also to keep us on task and moving things through earnestly. So
just John, for your benefit, the other thing related to that, what we experienced through the spring and summer months with the backlog, the long agendas, planning board for good reasons has a standing rule that no matters are taken up after a certain time. I think it's 10:30. And so depending on the depth of the agenda, very often applicants would sit there and not be heard and be pushed to the next meeting. And so the streamlining will really occur around just the turnaround time and not having to wait for the next meeting.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Jay. Just another question, Jay, for you is, shifting, is this a shift of work to your team or is it work they're already doing today? And if it's new work, how much new work are you actually anticipating?
Nope, it's work we're doing currently.
Okay.
Again, we're planning departments reviewing these, pulling together the various departments, putting together the same memo. So no, I would say this is similar work. It's the same work we're doing. If they submit it to planning board, it's really about the review authority more so than anything
Okay.
else.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Gleisting?
Yeah, this in theory, this definitely makes, a lot of sense. I guess one question I would ask is if you could pass to us the specific other towns and their ordinances, because you mentioned that other towns are doing this, and then, I'd like to understand what their thresholds are. You said ours are going to be by zone, by size and scale, by number of trips, 35 trips, things like that. So the other cities and towns in Maine that are doing this, I'd like to understand what they're doing. So if you've already done that background, that would be helpful. And then just, from a standpoint of, planning boards are special. They're very special. They're called out in state law and they exist by state law. And one of their primary functions is for public input, which is, very important. And, next to us, I think planning board gets the most people coming to weigh in on projects. And, as you said, Jay, a lot of things are black and white because the ordinance is the ordinance and planning board kind of has to go by the ordinance. But that public input process is very important. And so I'm kind of wondering, this feels to me a little bit like we've turned this on its head. Like I would kind of, I would support changing the ordinance, for planning board to say, hey, we want to turn this over to administrative review, but that it at least landed on their agenda and, they were able to get public input if somebody had some, to make a case, don't put this under admin review, and then move it to admin review. Is that something they could do today, or is that something that they would need an ordinance change today to do?
Yeah, I would say that would require an ordinance change because right now staff has no authority to approve. I think the one thing I would just make mention of, just for what it's worth in terms of the public comment, and I agree with everything you just said there, is, in my time, in my experiences, typically industrial projects, we don't get public comment.
Right.
And I think that's part of sort of the tactical decision to talk about just these specific areas where, as I said, in my time, I would really have to work hard to remember.
Yeah,
Not
and
to-
it makes sense.
Not
And
to say it may not happen, but I just
Right.
want to provide that as I've,
Yeah.
been working.
Right. Yeah, and in my mind, like I say, there's a lot of theoretical things that make sense about this. And I'm just wondering if the balance is, we say, hey, yes, we're gonna say this admin this admin review can happen, so which it can't today, but that it's gonna go on to the planning board agenda and they say, oh, this one's going to admin, maybe based under that criteria that you've already defined. And that still gives, a public process there. So, I'm kind of looking for, I would consider this, even though you're saying public hasn't weighed in or whatever, I still think this is for our town this is a very big change. And I think, if you went about it in steps to say, first, we're going to let the planning board, weigh in on that and say, whether or not to take it to admin review. Then, after you do, we do that for a couple of years and we say, hey, you know what? This makes sense. Let's just take those directly to admin review. I think a stepped approach, for a town to make a change this large would be something that I'd be interested in. And I just had one other thing, not for you, Jay, but for procedural question. I'm not quite sure where we are, if we've called the motion on the first read or whatever, but I don't remember. Do we take public input on first read or do we not? Or how does that work?
Yeah, we can. Yeah. I usually,
I just wondering if we do. I don't remember.
yeah, I usually call for it. Yeah. Yeah, it's not on the floor yet.
Yeah, this is still the introduction.
Yeah. We're still in the introduction.
Just a final point to Councillor Gleistein's point. I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree with the premise of the statement, though I think it may be defeating kind of the efficiencies and the reason we're talking about this to some extent. But there may be an administrative way of doing it to have Jay and his staff on every planning board agenda report the items that are going through administrative review. So there's a public agenda and there's an opportunity for awareness that something's going on here. And planning board members could inquire further, members of the public. It's just another way for people to be generally aware of what's going on.
And maybe we put something in the administrative, in that ordinance where PB could pull it back on the spot or pull it back if they wanted to or something, something to balance off,
Yeah, I mean, for my sake, I've given Jay this advice and I'll continue to. When in doubt, go to planning board. I mean, I'm not interested in getting my staff in the middle of a controversy. And so I think I'll keep preaching that, they should not be sticking their neck out. If there's any hint of controversy, we've got a perfectly good public process that we can put it through, and we will.
Well, actually, to add to that, I think, when Betsy suggests that, then the thought is, well, wait a second, the applicant then is showing up to the meeting, right? Still has to wait their turn, right? So when you say it defeats some of the efficiencies, that's what it would defeat. But if you made it a habit of making the last agenda item every planning board, hey, these are 5 things, which one of these, you know what I mean? That way you're not, quote, on the agenda. So the applicant doesn't have to sit through, it would just be a matter of looking one meeting ahead. So anyways, that's just some building off that brainstorming is because I understand the thought of, well, if you're 5th on the agenda, you don't want to sit there till 10 o'clock at night to be kicked to admin review, right? So if you kept it a meeting ahead, it would work.
So I would just, speak up for the public, to say that these matters are incredibly complicated. And sometimes people don't really realize the impact to the public and the impact to themselves or the town until it's well under discussion. And, it's just, I would just hope that we would go forward with caution on a change like this. I understand the applicant has to sit there, but they have a lot to gain, right? They're not in front of the planning board because they don't expect to gain from something. So, the public, on the other hand, really has to struggle to figure out what they're doing and, what's going on and dive into the details. And sometimes once somebody figures it out, it's too late to do anything. And that's what the public process is for. And that's what our members of the planning board are great at helping people understand. So, I think, we need to be cautious about this and, having them weigh in to say, yes, send this to an administrative review, I think, could be a good compromise.
No, I was actually agreeing with you. What I was just suggesting is at the end of each planning board, the final thing could be, here are 5 things in the pipeline. Just then the applicant doesn't have to show up if they're on the end of the pipeline decision.
Right. Yeah.
No, but I think you, I think you might be minimizing how much the planning board will need to know about each of those projects to decide whether it stays with them. So
fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Councilor Hamel, and then if we're going to debate it, let's put it on the floor. So, or get the public comment. So, Councilor Hamel, do you have a question for Jay, or otherwise I want to go into debate, I think.
Yeah, I do have a question. So, and I understand the desire to get this passed, to get this moved through. I know it's been in staff a long time. It's taken a lot of untold hours. So believe me, I'm sensitive to that. But I think you're kind of getting the sense that we want to make sure that can you hear me okay? For some reason, my connection is not working. Okay. The question I've got is, we have a pending light industrial. We have a pending issue that's been tabled that was brought by a property owner, by the Downs, to make some revisions to the light industrial zone, allowing warehousing and distribution. If this measure was in place, would that have an impact on that particular proposed revision?
yes, to the extent the council expands permitted uses to include warehouse and distribution, those would be permitted uses of the industrial nature that would be available for the administrative review process. But again, only if you choose to expand the permitted uses to permit that. So you hold the policy decision still.
And
Thank you.
I would also offer that the same thresholds would apply. So if it's a project where they're disturbing more than an acre, so if it's a large project, that would still go to planning board. It's really and so far, I guess I'd have to do a deeper dive, but I'm guessing all but 1 or 2 of the approvals in the innovation district have probably disturbed more than an acre of area. I mean, when you think about a 20,000 square foot building, you add in the parking and the grading, and you're at an acre. It doesn't take much sometimes. So, but as Tom said, it certainly wouldn't impact the discussion around the zoning change. That this is only about development review, not about those policy decisions that wholly rest with you all.
Is it a question or is it a comment, Jean Marie? Because I just want to put it on the floor. That's all.
Well, do you want me to put it on the floor?
I do. Is that what you're doing? Yeah. Before that, there's
No, but
one
I
person-
can.
Yeah,
So
hold on.
moved.
There's one person in the public. So I want to.
Oh, okay.
Does anybody in the public want to speak to this? Miss Bristol, come on in.
I'm sorry, Paul, who was the second on the motion?
Nobody yet. I
Nobody
shut
yet.
it down because I have
Nobody
somebody talking from the public.
Can you hear me?
We can. Yep.
Hello, everybody. And thank you for your time. The point that I wanted to make is in reading Jay's memo and also reading the site plan review ordinance, I understand that the intention is only to have minor development review apply to eligible projects in the industrial light. And I think you said the industrial areas of the innovation districts and the crossroads. But that seems to be the intent in Article 2, but then I think it gets a little bit fuzzy when in the languages you get down to Article 3. And so what I would ask is that there needs to be something in there that is abundantly clear that any other zoning district in town is only subject to major development review. It wouldn't apply anyplace else in town.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Allison.
That's
Jay,
it. Yep. Thanks
Yeah,
very
I
much.
saw you taking some notes there, Jay. So I was, yeah, okay. Jean Marie.
I'm gonna make a motion, but I want to make a comment after it's seconded.
Yes, you're next in line. Is there a second?
Second.
Jean Marie.
Yeah, just a reminder to, I think all of you, to be honest with you. I don't know if you were around when this first was worked on. There is a long history of work being done around this with long range planning, planning board input. And again, you know, you can always go back and look at all the notes and minutes and whatever if you so choose. But Allison made a really good point. I mean, it's very limited in what would go under the administrative review. That being said, remember also that this is just to move it forward to the planning board again. So that's all I wanted to remind folks, that this has been around. I've sat in and talked about it and whatever. I can't believe I'm the old lady of the town council. I don't know when that happened, but anyway, there you go.
Jean Marie, you've always been the old lady of the town council to me.
Oh, gee, thanks.
Councilor Clucci, then Councilor Johnson. By the way, we're in the discussion phase. It's on the floor.
Yeah, I support moving this forward. I think it's a great concept. I have a business in Old Orchard, and I've worked under these parameters for a long time now. Their ordinance is focused more on small, non-controversial projects, so it's similar. I think Councilor Gleisteen has some good points. One of the checks that they have in place in Old Orchard is if the planner and the code enforcer don't agree on whether it should pass administrative, then it goes to the planning board. And I think, you know, as this goes to our planning board, there might be some little tweaks like that come out that make sure that there's the right balance in terms of, you know, you don't want a planner, no offense, Jay, to be able to just force something through because, you know, because he can. But yeah, I think in general, it makes a lot of sense for the small, non-controversial projects to have this type of process or classification in place.
I heard Jay was responsible for the downs and all the growth in town. Is that true? I heard that. I saw that on Facebook somewhere. Jay, did you want to add to that?
That I was not going to respond to, but I did.
In the meanwhile, all questions should go to Jay.
Oh, you don't do Facebook, so we know.
I don't need to. I know what's on it. It's an easy game.
Yeah. I'll let that one lie for the moment. But you know, it's interesting. The question of sort of the review authority was one that was brought up and talked about quite a bit at the planning board level. Really, you know, one of the questions was, should we have this be an administrative review team, which would be all the same staff people we're going to bring to bear anyway, and sort of have it be sort of diffuse the power, so to speak, in this. And again, I think to Ms. Gleisteen's earlier point, different towns handle this differently all over. It's all over the map, and we'll certainly get you different examples. But it really, thresholds are different. The review criteria is different. The review authority is different. Some towns do it by, you know, the planner supported by staff, as we're proposed here. And that was coming from the planning board suggestion, rather than doing it as having sort of a staff committee that was all equal. So, yeah, these are sort of the issues that we've teased through. So depending on, you know, council's interest in, you know, there's no magic to any of this stuff. It's really about sort of what are the main issues and hoping that we're hitting upon the right chord in terms of sort of the right areas of town. So it's not as overly impactful or unintentionally impactful, have those unintended consequences, I guess I mean to say, and still trying to hit that right chord in terms of alleviating some of the work that the planning board members have to do while still applying the same level of review. So I don't know.
Councilor Johnson and then Councilor Gleisteen.
Yeah, I just want to digress for a second. I developed 10 acres of a private way in Scarborough. And what I did was I walked the line between a private way and a subdivision. Subdivision triggers site plan review through the planning board. private way is administrative review, just like what we're talking now. And I can attest to you, for sure, it's extremely thorough. No edges are cut. You know, I mean, from DEP, Army Corps, everything. But the interaction between the staff in the review, problem resolution was much quicker. You know, I wanted to avoid the site plan because thinking they meet every month. I'd have issues, they'd want me to fix them, I'd go for the month, something else would come up, I'd have to wait another month. The ongoing interaction again was, I thought, very stream and it was good. So I know this works. And for the public input, I know I developed 5 lots when I was there. Each and every time, all 11 budding neighbors had to get a hand-delivered note, and they had opportune time to then write into the town if they had any objections to me building another house. But anyway, that's my input. I think it works well, and I will definitely support it.
Were you saying that you didn't want to get in line like everybody else at site plan review?
That's correct.
All right. Counselor, sorry, it was too easy, Counselor Johnson. Counselor Gleistein.
Yeah, you know, so I've been involved in a big site plan review that the public was not in favor of. And maybe people wouldn't have thought of it as big, but it just happened to fall under site plan review. And so I kind of fall on the opposite side of Counselor Johnson on this. That worked for you as a developer. Again, I'm just kind of concerned, does it work for the public? And so, you know, the public really, you know, just getting a letter and then going to the town, if the town has decided to do it, I think, you know, can definitely be a challenge. This is very limited. So, you know, I think that's good. I'm kind of looking for the compromise here. Like, how do we make it happen, but still make sure that we are able, if the public has a way to say, hey, hold on. There's issues you guys don't know about, and here it is. You know, I think that's what we want to make sure that we maintain. Just a quick question, Jay, I'm just a little confused on this. This is only for Crossroads, no one else?
Nope. So that's how the proposal came forward to the town back in December of 18. And there was some discussions at different levels, long range planning, staff, I think, you know, others sort of said, well, maybe we should look, are there other areas that this makes sense? And I actually vaguely remember maybe this was part of a workshop that council had, it probably tangential. But anyway, so it includes the innovation district. Again, only industrial uses within the innovation district. It includes the industrial district and the light industrial district. So one of the other things that I should just make mention of, you'll see as part of this order, right? There's actually also changes to, changes to chapter 405. They're very administrative in nature, and all it does is enumerate the use categories in the CPD to make it very clear that it's these uses in category Roman numeral 4 that we're talking about. We're not talking about any of the other commercial type uses. Retail uses, office uses, those would all require site plan review as they would elsewhere. It's those industrial type uses.
And so is there a map that you could show us exactly what's impacted, or, I mean, could we just go to the zoning map and do?
I think going to the zoning map would be the easiest way, and but if there's a way I can help represent that better, I'm pleased to. But yes, if you pull up the zoning map and look for the industrial and light industrial districts.
Any LI and any industrial.
Yep.
Okay.
Counselor, hold on, sorry. Yep, Counselor Anderson.
Yeah, you know, this makes sense to me. But the one thing that I think we discussed here tonight that I think would be good as this goes to the planning board is to kind of continue to deliberate that public input component. You know, I think when I watched the workshop, and I only made it through the first hour and a half, I didn't watch the full thing. I did get a sense of a little bit of a concern there, and maybe the last hour things felt better, but you know, again, it would be good to just kind of bring that discussion point back up with them and just make sure that everybody feels good when we get this for the next reading.
Counselor Anderson, I think I'm giving you the last word. All right, Tony, you want to call the vote?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Glystein,
Yes, I'd like to see it moved to the planning board.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
yes,
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Order number 21011 is an act on the annual seasonal road posting for weight restrictions, if necessary, from February 15th, 2021 to May 15th, 2021. Tom?
Seasonal rite of passage, this should be reason for optimism. Spring is on the way. But this is the normal authorization we grant to the Public Works Director. Though the authority is vested for him to post, he doesn't always exercise that, but he'll do that at his professional discretion. And this is really just to make sure that we're protecting our critical infrastructure in town and our roads are not being damaged unnecessarily.
Thank you, sir. Do you have a motion?
so moved.
A second?
Second.
Discussion?
Uh,
Go ahead,
all
sorry.
Yeah, all I want to say is yes, welcome spring. We're looking forward to these roads being posted. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not going to allow any more discussion. Tody?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Glystein,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes,
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
and Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
The vote's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Order number 21012 is an act on the request to approve the 2021 Town Council goals. I'm sorry, I'm muting. We're getting a couple feedbacks here, so I'm just muting some people. Sorry, I was going to pull up the goals. I just lost my space here. I'm on page 47 of the packet, so give me 1 second. Okay. So for those of you that are watching, I believe January 15th, I believe we met. So approximately 2 or 3 weeks ago, the town council met for about 3 hours on a Saturday morning, and we had a town council goals discussion. It was pretty aptly covered, I believe, in the Scarborough Leader, or it might have been the Forecaster. So to reiterate here, our town council goals are: 1, continue to support town residents, businesses, schools, and town staff as we move through the COVID-19 pandemic and into recovery. 2, town finances will be more regularly reported to the town council and the general public, and the standard format and timing to be determined by the finance committee. 3, the council agrees to strive to maintain a no more than 3% increase to the mill rate. And we are going to establish first reading budget goals for school and town in collaboration with the Board of Education. There was some good discussion around this at the Finance Committee the other day. 4, no major capital investments over $5 million with the intent to revisit deferred capital projects from 2020. We will continue to support planning process for major capital projects. 5, the council will support the downtown committee's work in completing its charge and meeting its deadline of June 1st, 2021. 6, the comprehensive plan process to be fully completed, including adoption by June 30th, 2021, with an implementation plan to follow. And we will make sure to have an emphasis on public engagement. Next, the ordinance committee will complete the growth management ordinance review process and produce a recommendation to the entire council by June 30th, 2021. And lastly, proposed revisions to the town charter will be brought to the voters no later than the November 2021 general elections. And with that, do I have a motion
so moved.
and a second?
Second.
Discussion? Councilor Clucci?
Yeah, I just want to comment that we did have a somewhat lengthy discussion about the 2 finance committee related goals at our last meeting. And we did put something on the calendar for next week to filter down that 3% target to a little more granular level of detail. We have solicited feedback from the town and school departments to help inform that process. And I think we felt comfortable that as read, that we could achieve those goals.
Yeah, you guys had I watched the entire meeting. You guys had some good discussion there. It was a good meeting. Counselor Hamel, I believe you had your hand up. Yep.
Yeah, thanks. We try to take the approach of no new initiatives, in this school session. So some people could argue we really didn't accomplish that goal, but I wanted to draw your attention to the 4 committee-related goals that are at the bottom of the page. These were actually committed prior to the goal session, prior to us developing the 2021 goals. So, so those are really kind of ongoing. There's a lot of work associated with them. So I'm not trying to detract from them in any way, but the sum total of the initiatives, I think, reflect the pace and the intensity of work and the number of issues that we have and that we face as a town. So, we're doing our best to tackle them and not adding to the list any more than is absolutely necessary.
Thank you. Counselor Geisting?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out on the GMO goal that Counselor Katarina actually proposed a more aggressive timeline than the council agreed to during the goal setting. I was in favor of Counselor Katarina's more aggressive goal for the growth to review, which is our duty and our, we have the power and the obligation to review the GMO. The council at large, by consensus during the goal setting workshop, decided that we would go with June 30th, 2021. I think that, that was well discussed. So I think, in closing comments, when I talk a little bit about, this emergency ordinance for GMO, I think folks should remember, where we landed on that. As we discussed, bumping the GMO, I've been in favor of bumping the GMO up, quite a bit, as a few other counselors have. I think, the ordinance committee has done a lot of work on it, and I appreciate all the work that they have done. We did discuss the timing of the GMO, and that's where this council landed.
Thank you. Any others? Counselor Johnson?
Yeah, just back to the GMO for a second, not put anybody on the spot, but Tom, remember, we're still, the ordinance committee still is in dire need of that enrollment analysis by development by all grades. And we're hoping to get that, in time to be able to digest and formulate the recommendations to the council by June 30th. Just as a reminder. Thank you.
Understood. We're working with committee chair Katarina to provide that information to you shortly.
Counselor Katarina?
Yeah, yes. I was looking at March 31st originally, but now given what's going on, I do think it makes sense to push back on the GMO because I want to get it done correctly. Given everything that's going on, there's a lot of moving parts right now. So I do look forward to some interim, I don't want to call it emergency ordinance, but some sort of an interim something that we can do so that we are not in this situation where we have a full moratorium on building and construction in the town right now, or de facto, I should say. It's not a moratorium, it's a de facto moratorium because of circumstances around pulling licenses and whatnot.
Thank you. Any others? Counselor Anderson?
Yeah, I think just the one thing I noticed, again, kind of to build on what Don said earlier about focus right now, a lot of our goals are very much focused on the next 6 months, which I think is going to be part of the intensity. And so I do feel like at some point, maybe after a lot of those have moved forward and gotten better, it's probably good to circle back and just figure out what do we do with the rest of the half of the year. And again, we might all be exhausted coming out of budget, hopefully having a comp plan and a GMO, but we still have another half of the year that we can work through too. So I just think that's just something looking at them tonight, that I'm just seeing the dates and the things and feeling like it's all very much crammed in the next 4 months that we're trying to do a lot of this stuff.
I would just observe, Councilor Anderson, this being your first year, you'll appreciate how the year works. Summer takes over, then fall, and immediately you're in election cycle. And so these are the 6 months where you need to get work done. So I know it's a lot, but if you want to advance these priorities, they really need to be done before the summer months.
Counselor Clucci?
I think it's worth noting as well that when we had our goal setting workshop, at least myself personally, I wasn't aware that we had already reached our cap, our 135 units being issued for the year. And that's a relevant piece of information. And I think the goal is still, you can't rush good work, right? So I think the way it reads is probably still appropriate, but as Tom alluded to, and Paul, we may need to take some action before we can come up with the final solution to address the situation that we find ourselves in. So I just want to add that.
Thank you. Any others? All right, Tony, you want to call the vote?
Sure. Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Gleisteen,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
That was unanimous. Thank you.
Item number 9 is non-action items. There are none. Raise your hand if you have a standing or special committee report or liaison report. Councilor Hamel.
Thank you. I have a short list this evening of notices to be posted for appointments from the Appointments and Negotiations Committee. It's barely a half a page. So I'd like to read those if I may.
No, you can't. I'm kidding. Please.
Board of Assessment Review. Appoint Freela Tarpinian as a full voting member with a term to expire in 2023, and Charles Kanazak as full voting member to a term to expire in 2021. Coastal Waters and Harbor Committee, move Kevin Ferry to full voting member with a term to expire 2023, and appoint Andrew Fortunato as a first alternate, term expiring 2021. Community Services and Recreation Advisory Board, appoint Jean Ginn Marvin as second alternate to fill a term to expire 2021. Conservation Commission, appoint Randy Hogan as a full voting member with a term to expire in 2023, and Noah Perlett as a full voting member to fill a term to expire 2022. Long Range Planning Committee, appoint Rachel Hendrickson as the Planning Board Liaison, which is a non-voting member role. Parks and Conservation Land Board, appoint Noah Perlett as a full voting member to fill a term to expire 2021. Personnel Appeals Board, appoint Charles Kanazak as second alternate to fill a term to expire 2023. Senior Advisory Board, appoint Elise Bolda as a second alternate to fill a term to expire 2021. So I'm pleased to confirm those appointments with a vote at the next meeting by the council. That will mean that all of our committees, voting member, full voting members, will be filled, and the only remaining vacancies are really alternate roles. So this is a great piece of work by the full committee, Betsy and Ken Johnson, and really a great job by the staff, by Tody and Tom and the team. And finally, last but not least, but we've received an outstanding response to the suggestions that have come from the council for pumping this up on the website and on the internet. And we've received a really outstanding response in terms of people filling out applications online. It's dramatically improved our ability to attract and evaluate candidates. So great job by Allison Carrier, our communications expert. Really, I mean, the amount of results that we've been getting from those efforts has been really outstanding.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Katarina, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to let folks know that I spent almost all day last Thursday on Zoom with Maine Municipal Legislative Policy Committee, reviewing the bills that will be affecting municipalities. I don't have anything in particular to report out that were red flags. The good news is not that curtailments are good news, but the legislature is looking to maintain revenue sharing at levels that they've had in the past, looking to maintain school funding as much as possible. And also, there's an awful lot of waiting to see what the feds are going to do with further COVID funding, it's not CARES Act anymore, but what's going to happen in the next, it's coming down the pike now. The Congress is talking about it. But it was good. There were about 59 people on the Zoom meeting, and they did a really good job of running it and making sure that people could weigh in. So just wanted to let you guys know about that. There aren't as many bills this session, which doesn't surprise me, but it was a fruitful discussion.
Councillor Gleising?
Jean Marie, I just want to ask you a quick question. Was that also Homestead? You think they're going to keep the Homestead? where it was?
Yes. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, I think they're going to maintain things where they're at least make that attempt. And of course, the governor's budget just came out, so they have to work with that. So stay tuned.
And I could have this wrong, but I know you used to sit on that committee with Larissa. Is that right?
No, I
Okay.
used to. Larissa's now the town manager.
I was going to say, so now Larissa was on it. Do we have anyone else from the town?
No,
Okay, all right. That's
no. Ephraim Parashak, who's the town manager of Gorham, is the other person who represents this so-called legislative district. So.
Okay. Great, thanks.
Thanks, Jean Marie. Anybody else? Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, we had our second downtown committee yesterday, and I think it was really good. They're starting to get very organized and ready to rock and roll. I think, you know, there was a little bit of concern at the end around that June 1st deadline for the council. But I think we're trying to keep them to that as much as possible, just to make sure that, you know, we can advance that going forward. So, but again, I think very impressed with how quickly I think they're starting to kind of get organized and get going. And I think the next couple of meetings will really kind of be, you know, really interesting for people to watch and hear some of the thoughts that people are bringing to the table. We also had the Board of Trustees meeting for the library 2 weeks ago. And I shared with them our goal around the budget. And at the same time, they were getting feedback from a consultant that they have for the library expansion, where I think both things coming together just worked out well, where they're just going to probably defer that another year, probably in terms of what they're planning to do for the expansion. So the earliest it would be potentially brought forward for going on the ballot probably wouldn't be until 2022.
Thanks, John. Councillor Gleising?
Yeah, so I want to apologize. Pest management met. I was not able to attend. The chairperson does not want that meeting recorded. So I've not had a chance to touch base with Todd, but I know several folks on this committee in the town and on our council care about that issue. So I'll bring that forward and what they're up to. The last I checked in with them, they were up to bringing forward a brochure that looks really good, but I apologize. I don't have an update for you on that. And Jean Marie will, you know, feel free to pipe in on this. The charter committee, I think, a little bit messy, but made really good progress, I think, in coming up with a process for moving forward. They have formed 3 subcommittees, broken down kind of by different articles. And then we went through the changes that folks have presented so far, and for lack of a better term, kind of kept some issues to discuss at the whole committee. So I think that's going to work really well, where the whole committee is going to talk about, for lack of a better term, the more quote unquote controversial issues. And so I would encourage everyone to, at a minimum, tune in to those if you have any interest in some of the big topics of the charter. For example, they are going to discuss counselor pay. So if you have anything to say about that, you know, the only thing I would say about that is I think we found out this year that we can't really turn it down. So maybe we want in the charter that if any council member wants to, you know, say, I don't want the pay, that we could say that, because we had you know, I think everyone, all 7 members said, you know, we don't want it this year. And then Chairman Johnson went, wait, it's in the charter. Don't think we can do that. So, you know, the things like that folks could weigh in on. And some of the other, they're going to be looking at some of the parameters around recall. So I think, you know, it went well. I think expanding the committee so they can have 3 members on each subcommittee. And Tody and staff are doing, Tony, Tom, and Liam are, of course, doing a fabulous job. They've got all those posted already on the town calendar. So any of those that you want to weigh in on, I would maybe in the notes or the minutes or something, put which articles each committee is focused on, because it's not just 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8 and, you know, like that. So it might help the public to know that. The only other thing we've been getting, you know, emails and, you know, phone calls about, well, what we're going too fast. I think that remains to be seen. I do encourage everyone on this council to tell people, if you've got things, Liam set us up an email, which I think is awesome. You just mail the charter committee and at the town, and it goes to every member. So people can keep bringing things forward. I'm still a little confused on a few things. Like, I'm not sure, like, when does the town staff get to present the things that they know are important and need brought forward? So I'm not quite clear on that, but I think the staff's doing a great job. I think the committee, you know, has got a good way forward, and you know, I think it's going to work.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, I just have a question for Betsy and Jean Marie, kind of what related to what you just mentioned about, you know, providing feedback. I know in one of the meetings, it was discussed of potentially reaching out to each counselor and getting their input and feedback. Is there a decision on if that's going to happen, or again, should we just kind of provide feedback to Liam, or what's the best way to kind of get our input?
I would email the whole committee with our shared email address. What would you agree with that, Jean Marie?
Yeah, I just the email the committee. Was there a form, or am I thinking of something else?
No, I don't think so. I think
Okay, but
chairman, you know, the chairman is going to look at it and figure
Yeah.
out. We kind of weighed out, and we said, you know, if it's a big topic, we probably already covered it. Quite frankly, that was kind of the interesting thing when Liam put everything together. There was a lot of overlap, but if we haven't, then the chairman will decide, hey, are we going to talk about this as the whole committee? And everything will eventually come back to the whole committee. Or he might just, if you had a wording issue or something like that, he might just refer it right out to the right subcommittee. I would definitely get in anything you're interested in, and I would encourage everybody to get it out there. We've got a lot of people saying, I'm working on it, you know, and I'm still hoping the process is slow enough where I get my input. I'd say, do it, get it out there.
yeah,
We'll deal with it.
amen.
So here you go. I have one for you. On that issue of counselor pay, I just want to request that any increase be retroactive.
Yes, me too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, think how much I could get. Woo!
You are the old lady on the council. It'd be your.
Yeah, and I want you to know that it came up that the pay should be $20,000 a year, but
It
then I
should be.
found out the person was kidding. I was
Well,
like,
then when
"Bummer."
everybody says we're just corrupt, when everybody says we're corrupt, lining our pockets, it's true, right?
I know.
Councilor Cloutier.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this came up in earlier parts of the meeting, but I thought it'd be worth repeating here. We did review a schedule for this year's budget process that was prepared by staff. I've sent at our last finance committee meeting. I've sent that to Sarah Layden, our counterpart on the school board, and expect some feedback from them after they have a chance to digest it. We do have a workshop scheduled for the 10th at 4 o'clock to discuss budget goals. And the Avesta affordable housing proposal that came to, we had a workshop. I have seen some additional materials coming forward on that. It's because it's an affordable housing contract. It's a little different than what we had articulated in the CEA process. And I reached out to the Housing Alliance, and they expect to get that on their agenda in February to discuss it. And we may get it on a Finance Committee agenda in the near future as well to review our portion of that process. But it's not, and we talked about this at the workshop as well, it's not a clear linear process because it's an affordable housing, not TIF, but CEA. That's a little different than what we envisioned when we put that process together.
So a quick question on that, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
John, your email to the Finance Committee on School Board was excellent. Thank you very much for doing that.
Well, thanks for your feedback.
Thought it was great. And then I did a question on, when you brought up the Avesta housing project, and we discussed it at finance, and then we got a new piece of information tonight. At least maybe I'm totally out of it. So maybe we all knew this but me, and that would not be a surprise to me, that, we've run out of building permits. And so my question was to Tom is, was there switch to affordable housing at that site? Is that in any way related to the fact that we've run out of growth permits?
I don't believe so. I first heard of this last fall, certainly well before we had any knowledge that we were going to be out. So I don't believe there's any connection between the two.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Real quick, leadership met at 4 p.m. today. We have been on Zoom together since 4 p.m. today, so that might explain some of my delirium and Tom actually losing his composure for once. We had a good, Tom brought up, I'll send it to everybody, but we just reviewed some of our reserve accounts for traffic impact fees, which was super helpful. It's always there, but it was really nice to get an idea of how much money is in each designated area. For instance, there's 4 different accounts for Payne Road, right? So it was really interesting to see how much was in each Payne Road account. I don't want to rain on Tom's parade, but we talked about there will be a CIP request in the budget. I think that will have the smart lights up at Oak Hill that are similar to the very successful smart lights that are in Dunstan. And it looks like there's almost enough money in the reserve account to actually pay for those without passing on the tax burden to the public. So there's some good news in those accounts. I know a lot of times I know that traffic and the money around traffic seems to be a blind spot for me. So I will send that along, and it's always good to just reiterate those. We did talk about the, as stated before, the quote, I don't, who knows what it's called. I don't even know what it's called yet. The GMO conundrum we're in right now. I guess the only thing I would add to that is obviously, people have opinions on it, but it will be sponsored by me. So I specifically pick up the phone and call Tom and asked him to help us brainstorm. So it'll be a counselor sponsored initiative, and I'll be the one sponsoring it. Lastly, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Finance Committee. I watched the Appointments Negotiation Committee, which was very boring. But the Finance Committee, sorry, Don. It was just, I didn't quite make it to when you went to executive session, but
Excited.
We're brutally efficient, so that can be boring.
fair enough. I think I got 8 minutes. But anyways, the Finance Committee, I thought you guys had great discussion, great flow. Clucci, you make an excellent Finance Committee chair, so you're in the right place there. So I just wanted to give you guys a shout out. And that's it. I think the only other thing is, speaking of Allison, Allison's it's not Carter, it's Carrier, Allison Carrier. She just reached out to me over email suggesting haven't made a video in a while, and this is the time of year that it's probably good to make a budget video since we are ramping up to budget season. So I would love a partner in crime. So if you're interested in maybe coming up to town hall with me and shooting some sort of budget video just about the timeline and some of the preliminary stuff, reach out to me, because it's more dynamic when there's 2 of us. So that's it. That's my leadership report. So with that, item number 11, raise your hand if you have a councilor comment. Councilor Katarina.
Yeah, I just did visit the Downs today for the ribbon cutting for the vaccination, and I just wanted to say I can't believe what they've done to that building in 2 weeks. It's absolutely amazing. And it was kind of fun for me to walk in there because I worked there in the 70s counting money, legally counting money. And it was dirty, smoky, whatever. So those were my last memories of being inside that building. But people were really upbeat, and I'm very excited about it. Tom and I were chatting in the parking lot. We did meet a couple of folks who pulled up who didn't have appointments, which I think we got to do a better job. We as a community or society need to do a better job of communicating to folks how you get the shots. And yes, it's frustrating right now, but it's going to work out. But feel free to reach out to me or anyone on the council, anyone watching this who's concerned about the fact that I've been waiting forever for a shot. So I hear you, and patience is a virtue sometimes, but we're getting there, and at least the Downs is up there. I also just very briefly, I made kind of a funny little video on my town council page this weekend, but every time I walk at the beach, I get really frustrated, and also at park, because people forget, you're supposed to be wearing masks in public places. So just a reminder to wear your mask, even though you're out in the fresh air. It's state law. We don't want to get in any trouble. We don't want you getting in any trouble. And also the dogs need to be on leashes between 1 and 3. And you don't want Ms. Katerina, the town councilor, giving you a lecture and acting like a school marm, because I've been known to do that. So anyway, that's it for me. Thanks.
Any others? Counselor Anderson?
Yeah, so one thing that I've seen more of recently in emails that we've been getting from constituents has been concern about the ICE facility and trying to understand more information around that. So I'd really like to see us maybe have a non-action item on the next agenda that just allows the town to share the information that we know about it more publicly, so that we can be transparent and facilitate giving that information. I know Jean Marie today suggested that one person go to Jay. I just think whatever Jay shares would be good to share more broadly, because I think it's an issue that's going to be coming up more often. I know there's a protest scheduled this Friday around that specific facility. So I just see that continuing to become more and more of a topic that's going to be interested, or that's going to have interest of the public. And I just want to make sure that we make sure people know what's happening, where it is. And, that I think from a town perspective, it is kind of what it is at this point. And there's not much we can do, and what can they do to address it if they have a concern.
Thank you, sir. Any others? None? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Cody?
All right. Counselor Pucci,
Yes.
Counselor Glystein,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Katerina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
and Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.